Now with us right now, you hear him and Ryan Kramer on the Sports Gambling Podcast. It's our guy, Sean Green, with us right now. Sean, thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always love chopping it up here on VSiN, and I'm glad they finally gave Greg a night off. Guy's a machine. He earned it.
You know, Sean. As I said to Pam Maldonado earlier in the show, we could have made odds for where Greg was spending the night off, and Texas Roadhouse would have been the favorite, and that's exactly where he spent the night.
That's a minus 2,000 favorite. They're not even putting a line out, and then he'll probably crack some cold ones and review some beers. But to clarify, he's not dodging the fact that when we talked brackets last week when we were in studio, he had Arizona winning it all. So it's not that. It's not that. Just in case the audience is concerned.
You had a piece of Princeton in that game, didn't you?
That was Kramer. Kramer had a little Princeton money line. I didn't have Arizona going very far. I did have them beating Princeton. My Final Four is still alive. I think I got 6 out of the Elite 8 floating around. So I got UCLA winning it all. And then 4 out of my 4, knock on wood, of my Final Four are still there. So we'll see.
You're doing better than I am. I only have half left. Creighton and Texas are what survived through the first weekend for me into my Final Four. Still have the champ, though. I have the horns. So still alive into the second weekend. You know what? Since we brought up Princeton, let's start there. Let's start in the South, because that's the top left of the bracket, even though it's Friday, Sunday. And let's start with that Princeton and Creighton game, because I was talking about it a little bit earlier, Sean. I just think this is a horrible matchup for Princeton. The one thing with those first 2 games, Arizona, not a great defensive team and lacked focus. And we saw both of those rear their heads in that game. And then Mizzou, arguably one of the worst defensive Power 5 teams in the country, and Princeton got anything they wanted offensively in that game. Now comes Creighton, who very efficient on the offensive end and top 15 efficient defense-wise. I think it's a horrible matchup for Princeton. I actually already laid Creighton 9.5. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. Again, I have Creighton playing UCLA in the national championship, and this Creighton team came out. They looked really good in both games, and there's nothing that I saw so far in this tournament to get me off Creighton. And, I mean, they got the Big East Defensive Player of the Year in Ryan Kalkbrenner. They're top 15 in adjusted defense. Also, they're top 15 in free throw percentage. I love taking teams where there's a decent size discrepancy in free throw percentage, and that's what you see with Creighton here. They're just a better team by a wide margin. I could see how you can talk yourself into Princeton, but let's be honest. I mean, if they're not hosting the Ivy League Conference tournament, I don't know how much you follow that, but they hosted it.
As the 2 seed. As the 2 seed.
As the 2 seed.
Yeah.
We gave it out on the show. Colby, Kramer, and I were all like, yeah, we'll take Princeton to win the Ivy League at plus 230. It's a home game.
Yeah.
So, they've kind of had a nice path here. And if they're not hosting the Ivy League Conference tournament, as a 2 seed, do they win that? Are they even here? Again, not trying to take away from what they've put together here. And as a 15 seed, making it to the Sweet 16, quite an accomplishment. First Sweet 16, I think, for Princeton since 1966. So
that's correct.
Shout out to the Tigers there, but I like this Creighton team a lot. And there's just, I don't know. I just don't see Princeton slowing them down. I guess you could talk yourself into, maybe Princeton's defense. Yeah, I don't know. Their Princeton defense has played better than their season average would suggest. Again, that's why I think it's going to regress here against Creighton. But maybe if they can really shut down their outside shooting, they have a shot here to cover. But to me, this is, there's plenty of time off for them to lose that momentum, that magic that Princeton team had. And I think that all favors Creighton. So I'm with you. I still like it at 10, even like 10.5. Give me Creighton all day.
Yeah, it just feels like you remember that Florida Gulf Coast Florida game where everyone wanted Florida Gulf Coast to win that game, and Florida just kind of sucked the life out of them as the game went along and won by double digits. Kind of feels like the same deal is going to happen in this one. And even though I don't love Greg McDermott, He's not Matt Painter, who had all that time to prepare for a 15 last year and found a way to lose to St. Peter's with an NBA lottery pick on his team.
Really impressive.
Oh, hey, look, it's the most impressive 3-year run of losses in NCAA tournament history, and it will never be caught. It will never be caught.
It really is. I mean, again, I know they wouldn't fire him because he has been so successsul, but at some point you realize, I mean, Matt Painter's like the Marty Schottenheimer of college basketball, right? Like 14-2 in the regular season, but the guy's not going to win you a playoff game. He's not going to win you a Super Bowl. Do you run him out of town at some point? I don't think they will. That's not the kind of program Purdue runs. But man, as a Purdue fan, you gotta be kicking yourself.
Yeah, again, it's the worst loss in NCAA tournament history. What happened last Friday night? There's no arguing it. The UMBC Virginia upset was just one fluky half. There was no fluke about the result on Friday night with FDU winning that game against Purdue, 16-1 for the second time. Sean, we'll keep it on Friday. Let's keep it in that South region. Let's go to the number 1 overall seed, Alabama, who handled their business despite no points from Brandon Miller in round 1, and then really just an ugly game against Maryland that they just took over and dominated in the second half. They get San Diego State, who really had to work against Charleston and took it to Furman in the round of 32. 7.5. There is 1-8 out here in Vegas, but it's mostly 7.5 across the market. I think San Diego State's got the horses to at least keep this thing close. I don't know if they can win, but 7.5 feels pretty heavy here.
Yeah, and again, this Alabama team, I'm with you. I'm taking SDSU 7.5, 8, whatever you can get them at. It is interesting because Alabama, when they score over 70 points, 29-1. When they score less than 70, they're 1-4. And I think this Aztecs team, they might be able to hold them to sub 70. And then to your point, I don't know if they get the outright win. They're not my favorite dog here of the Thursday and Friday slate, but certainly they're going to be alive. And, the Furman, I think, had a pretty decent offense. And, man, you just watch that game and the length and just the aggressiveness in which they play defense. This might be a little bit of a wake-up call for an Alabama team that maybe kind of looking ahead past San Diego State. Everyone's talking about, they got the easiest path here to the Final Four and to the championship game. I do think Alabama gets the win, but 8 points, 7.5 feels like a lot for a San Diego State team. That's experience. We're talking about 4 seniors and a junior on that team. An experienced team that plays defense is always going to be a tough out, and I think that's what this Aztecs team is.
If San Diego State beats Alabama and San Diego State Creighton, that would be the dream for the Creighton Final Four future that I have. So that would be what I want. That would be what I want. But look, if it's Creighton Bama, I give Creighton a real shot to pull that upset against Bama if we get that on Sunday. I know you agree with me on that, Sean.
Oh yeah, I love this Creighton team. They're going to be frisky throughout, but yeah, we'll see. I do think San Diego State keeps it close, but Alabama at some point. The interesting thing too is like, what if Alabama gets down? Like, how do they respond? Mm-hmm. They're not like a veteran team who has had to have comeback victories. They're kind of used to playing from ahead there. So they ironically, they haven't seen a lot of adversity on the court. They've seen a boatload off the court. But it'll be interesting to see if San Diego State can test them.
So we kind of just mentioned it. If it is a Creighton, Alabama regional final in Louisville, you and I both give Creighton a really good shot to win that game. What would be the number you would want to see on Creighton in that one for that to be like, okay, this is a no-brainer. We're taking points here with the Jays?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because their defense, I don't think obviously is as good as San Diego State, and San Diego State with a really good defense, still getting all those points. But yeah, anything I think north of you're saying like 4.5, 5. I think I like Creighton there. If it's 4 and below, I think maybe I would talk myself into Alabama actually.
I think 5 feels right.
Yeah,
because if it's Creighton, San Diego State, I think it should be 4, but probably with San Diego State coming off a win against Bama, that would shrink a little bit, which would be an awesome time to bet Creighton. That's all I would know if it's San Diego State and Creighton. Sean, stick around. We got more games to get to in the NCAA tournament. We're gonna go to Madison Square Garden next. We're gonna go to the East region, that bottom left corner of the bracket. Get your thoughts on FAU, Tennessee, and K-State, Michigan State next here on the GP. Sean, we're going to go to the East region. We'll go to MSG. Thursday games will start with Michigan State and Kansas State. A rarity where a 7 seed is favored over a top 3 seed. The last time this happened, it actually involved Tom Izzo and Michigan State, where they were a 7 seed in 2015 against 3-seeded Oklahoma, and they won that game outright en route to making the Final Four before losing to Jahlil Okafor and Duke. 2-point line consensus right now, total 137. Just everything in my brain says Kansas State, but all the success Izzo has had in this second weekend, 18-6 all time, straight up, makes me pause.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the tournament record for Izzo, he has 16 tournament wins as a worst seeded team. So
man,
I think it makes sense why they're the favorite, right? I think they opened as a small dog, and then everyone kind of flipped the number. So don't like being on the other side of that line movement. But man, I'm on Michigan State here. I had them getting to the Final Four, and I do like them in this matchup. It's tough to fade Kansas State. I mean, their coach has Jerome Tang, Big 12 Coach of the Year. They're such a likable group. They've been great to me ATS wise, 23-11 Kansas State during the season, but man, I just think this is Tom Izzo, and this is the Tom Izzo team, right? That kind of succeeds in the tournament. I always like Michigan State because I like Tom Izzo, but in particular, when you have a team that doesn't have, some like super high draft picks, and they got knocked out of the first game, the first round there in the Big Ten Conference tournament. And I thought, oh no, this is when Izzo gets like a full week to yell at his guys, to tell them they ain't anything, and no one believes in them, and they've rallied around, and they've just looked really good. And unlike previous Izzo teams, this Michigan State team can hit the 3 ball. They're I think top 5 in the country 3-point percentage. Mm-hmm. So I really like the Spartans here. This is a tough Kansas State team to fade, and I understand why people would be on them, but I'm with Michigan State here.
And it's also, too, regression to the mean here for Michigan State. They could not buy a 3 against Marquette and still found a way with 2 made 3-pointers to advance. And the regression monster, we usually look for the negative regression monster, but regression to the positive also in play here for Michigan State's 3-point shooting. Like you said, one of the 20 best teams in the country.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, and again, I was all in Michigan State against Marquette. Love them there. Again, Tom Izzo versus Shaka Smart. That's all you need to tell me. Any day, any time. I'm taking Tom Izzo. No offense to Shaka Smart there, but and your point, I didn't even think about. I knew they were cold. I didn't realize they only hit 2 there. Yeah, I mean, if they hit some of these 3s, look out, because this team is. I think they can be a handful, and I think they can kind of continue their run. And why I like them in to get to the Final Four is Tom Izzo on those quick turnarounds. Now, with like 1 day rest, essentially, winning the Elite 8 game and or Sweet 16 game, and then winning the Elite 8 game, winning those back to back. I do think there's even some value on like a Michigan State future to get to the Final Four at like plus 300 because I like their chances to move on after that. He's really good coaching his team up on a quick turnaround.
All I will say is if we get Izzo versus Barnes in the Elite 8, that's even more automatic than what you were saying with Izzo versus Shaka Smart.
Yes, 100%. And I kind of talked myself into Tennessee. I don't feel great about it, but I did take Tennessee. And, oh, man, Michigan State versus Tennessee. I'm with you. That's going to be Cash City for Michigan State.
Yeah, it's an automatic. That's one of those principal plays that you just got to do. And if Tennessee beats you, so be it. By the way, you just mentioned it's Tennessee is a 5.5-point favorite. So you ended up laying that with the Vols against Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, begrudgingly. I'll be honest though too. Part of it is I'm in a March Madness Survivor pool, and Tennessee. So I got to pick a game on Thursday, money line. and Tennessee was the biggest number. So then I'm like kind of talking myself into Tennessee. Normally I'm with just an automatic fade Rick Barnes in the tourney, but I'm going to talk myself into their defense. The fact that the FAU coach is already saying like, oh, they're playing Australian rugby rules and that kind of stuff. So maybe maybe Tennessee's kind of already in their heads for this game. So yeah, I'll take the Vols here.
Tennessee, again, arguably the most impressive performance of the tournament against Duke. Just men versus boys, it looked like in that game, with Tennessee advancing as an underdog, even though they were the 4 seed. Now they get Florida Atlantic, who took full advantage of their draw, beating Memphis and the 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson, first ever Sweet 16 appearance for Florida Atlantic's program. All right, let's go to the games in Vegas. You and I were kind of talking about this during the break. A game that we think that anything can happen in. Arkansas and Connecticut, 8 versus 4, 7:15 on Thursday night Eastern time. Again, Las Vegas hosting tournament games for the first time ever. This is a 3.5-point line with the Huskies favored in this one. Total 140 now. Sean, I'm not betting this pre-flop because these two teams, they're immensely talented. They both have they both have some stupidity about them as well. But boy, when both of these teams have it going, they're as good as anyone in the country.
Yeah, no, you want to talk about two ultimate variance teams. Arkansas and Connecticut really, really fit that model. The stuff I love to bet on numbers wise, Connecticut being the second in the nation offensive rebounding, that kind of stuff all favors UConn. But, it kind of just came down to the coaches. Like I'm all about the Gus bus there and or Must bus and versus Connecticut. Anytime you can get a chance to fade a Hurley in the tournament, it's tough to pass up. I just think Arkansas has a chance to win this game outright. I think they're going to be a live dog. So yeah, give me Arkansas.
Man, this is I just can't wait for this game and a matter of just what crazy thing will determine the outcome for this one. I do have a lean towards Arkansas, but I just can't bring myself to at least get in on it pre-flop. All right, let's get to the team that I know you picked to win it all, Sean, and that's the UCLA Bruins. They're taking on Gonzaga. Gonzaga's beaten UCLA the last 2 times they faced each other. Of course, the famous buzzer beater by Suggs in Indianapolis 2 tournaments ago, and then last year in the regular season in Las Vegas around Thanksgiving, where Gonzaga just absolutely obliterated UCLA when they were both 1 and 2 in the country. Right now, again, UCLA 2-point favorite here. Gonzaga with the longest win streak going in the country. UCLA, even with the injuries, able to get through a tough Northwestern team in around the 32.
Yeah, Gonzaga 2-5 when they don't score 75 points. And I think this UCLA defense can hold them under 75. Their offense for UCLA is obviously, really good. I mean, Jaime Jaquez has been so fun to watch. Really good tournament run so far. He's got double digits in 12 straight games, 33 of his last 36. He's just a fun watch. And I don't know. I mean, Gonzaga, I think, was kind of fortunate to get by that TCU team. If they were calling some of those Drew Timme hook and hold moves, maybe they don't get the win. But again, Gonzaga to me is a team. They're right up. They're not quite as bad as Purdue, obviously, but it's just tough to imagine Timme putting the team on his back and getting past this UCLA Bruins team. Like the Bruins team has a strong core of veterans, and I know Timme has a ton of experience, but they have Jaquez, they have Tiger Campbell, they have guys around, their stars that have been out there for a long time, and they have depth too. That's why I don't think the injuries are going to slow them down. And yeah, maybe it's crazy to say, but I think they also have the slight coaching edge here. This should just be an awesome game. But yeah, I'm locking up UCLA here -2. I think it's a good spot for them.
Sean, just of course you mentioned you have UCLA as your champion in this tournament. Just how confident are you now with 16 teams left?
I feel very good, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised they still have them. I don't know what you guys are seeing over there, but I would say like.
So those odds you see on the screen right now at home, and you saw Sean now. Well, they just swapped them on us. So UCLA to win it all 8-1. You're about to say that's a pretty good price. All things considered.
Yeah, I got a taste of it, before the tournament started at 12-1. So now that we're down to 16 teams and it's only 8-1, I think that's still a pretty good price here in the futures market. So yeah, give me UCLA to win it all once again here at 8-1.
I actually think there's some prices that are actually pretty good, all things considered, with only 16 teams left on there. Sean, we got one more region to preview as well, and also we'll get your thoughts on some NBA action as well. That's coming up next here on the GPE. Sean Green's still with us right now. The SGP podcast, of course, where you can find Sean. Sean, let's get to the final region, and you and I are going to disagree on one of these games, but we'll save that for last. Let's start with the 1 seed in the Midwest, Houston taking on Miami. Canes with a come-from-behind win against Drake and a wire-to-wire win against Indiana. Houston has really only played one good half so far in this tournament, but they didn't need to play any good halves against Northern Kentucky, and the one good half was good enough to beat Auburn by a ton in the second half, almost beating them by 30 in that second half on Saturday. But Sean, this is a 7-point line, 138 the total. I really want to put Miami in my account, but I just can't get there, at least yet.
Yeah, I think you're hesitating there for good reason. I think the injuries that Houston are dealing with are tough ones because they're both guys that'll probably play through, but won't be 100%. And how can that really, how's that going to affect them? I like Miami and the points here because Miami can really push the pace. They shot 39% from the three versus Indiana. I think they're just going to be able to shoot a bunch against Houston and kind of hang around in this game. I don't know, like Houston to me, I think may get the win, but I think this is close enough that you're kind of crazy not to take Miami here in the points. I know everyone's been down on the ACC, maybe for good reason here, but I think Miami, they've shown a nice little spark here in these first couple games. So I think Miami +7 is a good bet.
Just the defense of Miami is another holdup, but again, those guards are so good. And if Houston just one of those games where they're not making shots, this should be a tight game all the way through. That's a 7:15 tip Eastern time on Friday. And then the game you and I are oppo on, I'm on Texas. You're on Xavier, Sean. Why the Musketeers in this spot?
Well, yeah, I didn't want to totally derail your bracket, but I think I like, again, Xavier to me, this some of this is the eye test with Xavier. I really like what I've seen out of them so far. In the same way that I really liked what I saw out of Creighton. Obviously Xavier, what are they sitting at third in the country right now, 38.9% at the three ball. I think that could give Texas some trouble. They can hit their free throws. Obviously Texas can as well. I understand why people are on Texas. I understand why you'd want to lay the 4 here, but I don't know. I like Xavier, and it feels like, to me, at least in the Sweet 16 round, we could see some redemption for coaches that we've long bagged on, with the exception of Hurley there. But, Sean Miller, I think this could be a redemption game for him. I think it could be a redemption game for Tennessee. I don't know. I just think Xavier, the top 7 offense, 63rd defense, they're going to be in this mix. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas gets the win, but I think 4 is good, and I'm going to be on the money line here.
Xavier again, 4-point underdog. You get a pretty reasonable price money line as well on the Musketeers. Again, this is the top right of the bracket. Winner, of course, plays on Sunday in Kansas City. Sean, let's go to some NBA here as we wind down the regular season. As people could see, you got a little Philly in your DNA there, Sean. Just a hint. But I asked this about any guest who has anything Philadelphia about him with the Sixers here. We know how good Embiid is. We know how good Harden is when he's at his best. But does this team have a shot of actually getting through the Eastern Conference, Sean? Or is this just going to be another year where it ends in disappointment in the second round where they either lose to Boston or Milwaukee?
Yeah, this year, I'll say what feels different about this year. The previous, I mean, we still do have Doc Rivers as our head coach, which is unfortunate for a lot of the time. But I'll say this: I think the fact that, especially this year, it feels like Harden knows his role on the team. Like he's okay being the distributor and not. I think there was some, these past couple of years where it's like, hey, I want to be a scorer, but how much? Like, obviously, Joel's the main scorer, but am I the number two scorer? Where does Maxey fit in? And I think, like, this year in particular, he's kind of figured out his role as a distributor. I actually saw them when they played the Clippers out here in LA, and I like the mojo from the team. So anything can happen in the playoffs, but the East is so wide open. You can't tell me they can't hang with the Celtics or the Bucks. And I think getting that home court I think could be a big deal. So we're down to the wire here, but a couple more regular season wins, and they were just coming off. I mean, they're 8-2 now in the last 10. They had a nice little win streak before they lost, but yeah, I think they have a legit shot. If they don't win this year, no way you can bring back Doc Rivers.
Kind of surprised they brought him back after last year, and that's not even including 2 years ago with the debacle of debacles against Atlanta. It's a little bit.
I've fired Doc Rivers so many. It's right up there. I fired him. I fired Howie Roseman a bunch. Howie has redeemed himself. Doc
sure
Rivers
has
yet to redeem himself, but he's got to be the most fired head coach in Philly sports history right now.
Well, again, it's a good thing that everyone has kind of forgotten about the Flyers in that city, because that would the revolving door a head coach would be the thing, but they don't win, and not good enough at this point there in Philly. All right, one more NBA thing, because I want to ask you one NFL question before we let you go here. Western Conference wise, Sean, are we trusting Denver? Are we trusting them?
Oh, man. Again, this is rarely do we see this in the NBA. Don't you feel like this is the most wide open NBA season?
100%.
To your point, Nuggets have been kind of obviously the number one seed right now, and they're dominant. You get that home court, you get that elevation, but I mean, are you trusting them to win a 7-game series against some of these other big teams? Well, then on the other side, I mean, look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Look at Ja Morant. He had to go to strip club gun flashing on social media counseling. What does that impact the team? I have no idea. You got the Suns hanging around until Chris Paul snaps his hamstring inevitably. The Kings are frisky, but you want to talk about not trusting a team. And then you got the Warriors, who obviously they have the veteran experience, but can they win a road game? So it's really pretty crazy. Both sides of the conferences. I guess you would still you got to keep the Nuggets a favorite there, but I don't know if I trust anyone. I would just kind of, if you're looking to play some futures, take some darts here on some of the longer shots, because I think it's wide open. So I do think. Again, I don't like the way they're playing the regular season, the Clippers, with the resting and the load management and all this nonsense. But their futures price, I'm sure, is pretty good, and they have a ton of playoff experience. So they're kind of an interesting long shot, I think.
Clippers right now 6-1. The current 3 seed, the Sacramento Kings, at 22-1. Their defense is probably not good enough at this point.
I mean, that's crazy that a 3 seed is 22-1 right now.
Longer than the Lakers, but I know why that is. We all know why that is, but it's still kind of crazy to see. All right, Sean, before we let you go, with the impending trade of Aaron Rodgers out of the NFC, this quarterback situation in that conference is so dire, other than Jalen Hurts. I mean, we're looking at a conference, Sean, where there's a legitimate argument to be made that Jared Goff will be the second best quarterback in the NFC this year. That is just insane that we have reached this point.
We were having the debate. Me and my buddies, they go, is it Kirk Cousins? It can't be Kirk Cousins. He can't be the second best quarterback in a National Football Conference. I would say, and again, he's getting some steam now and some hype, and they're building around him, but I like what I've seen out of Justin Fields. I know he's so raw as a talent. And, Mike Lombardi, big guy here on the network, always likes to bust his chops. But I think he is like a guy that could make a leap up and kind of maybe get mix of the top quarterback. Someone to keep an eye on.
He's Sean Green. Sean, thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, you can hear Sean always on the SGP podcast as well. Sean, thanks, buddy. Thanks for hanging with us.
Loved it.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.